The mare's hooves pounded through snow so thick that Catherine Grace could barely see 3 feet ahead, her breath coming in frozen gasps as she clutched the reins with fingers gone numb hours ago. It was December 1882, and the blizzard that had swept down from the Sierra Nevada mountains into the San Joaquin Valley was the worst anyone in Porterville, California had seen in 20 years. Behind her, miles back in that small town nestled at the foothills, her younger brother lay burning with fever, his 10-year-old body racked with pneumonia that threatened to steal his last breath before morning came. The doctor had pressed the precious vial of morphine into her hands along with instructions to reach Visalia, where a traveling physician from San Francisco had the new medicine that could save Tommy's life. Catherine was 22 years old, unmarried, and the only person willing to make this desperate ride. Her father had died 2 years prior in a ranch accident, and her mother had succumbed to consumption the winter after. Tommy was all she had left in this world, and she would ride through hell itself before she let him slip away. The general store owner had tried to stop her, warning that the storm would only worsen, that she would freeze to death before reaching the next town. But Catherine had grown up breaking horses on their small ranch, had learned to shoot and ride before most girls learned to sew, and she was not about to let fear stop her now. The wind howled like a living thing, tearing at her heavy wool coat and the thick scarf wrapped around her face. Ice crystals stung her exposed skin, and her mare, a sturdy bay named Rosie, struggled through drifts that sometimes reached her chest. They had been riding for nearly 4 hours, and Catherine knew they should have covered more ground, but the storm made every mile feel like 10. Her fingers ached where they gripped the reins, and she could no longer feel her toes in her boots despite the layers of wool socks. She had just crested a small rise when she saw something that made her heart leap. Through the swirling white, a dark shape materialized, growing larger as it approached. Another horse and rider moving toward her with purpose. For a moment, fear gripped her. The territory was not entirely safe, and a woman alone could face dangers worse than any storm. But as the figure drew closer, she saw that he sat his horse like a man who belonged in the saddle, and something about the way he rode straight and true gave her a strange sense of relief. "Madam," the voice cut through the wind, deep and urgent, "you cannot be out in this." The man pulled his horse alongside hers, and even through the snow and her frozen exhaustion, Catherine could see he was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with ice clinging to the dark stubble on his strong jaw. His eyes, a striking gray blue even in the dim white world of the storm, held genuine concern. He wore a heavy sheepskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat tied down with a bandana under his chin, and his horse was a massive roan that looked like it could plow through anything. "I have to reach Visalia," Catherine shouted back, her voice hoarse from the cold. "My brother is dying. I need medicine." The man's expression changed instantly, shifting from concern to determination. "You will never make it alone. This storm is getting worse, and you're already half frozen. I am heading to Visalia myself. We ride together." "I cannot ask you to risk yourself," Catherine protested, even as relief flooded through her. "You are not asking. I am telling you." His tone left no room for argument, but there was kindness beneath the firmness. "My name is James Jackson. I have a ranch about 5 miles east of Porterville. I was in Wood Lake visiting my aunt when the storm hit, and I'm trying to get back, but Visalia is closer now than going back. We help each other stay alive, and we both get where we need to go." Catherine wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her independence, but she was practical enough to know that she was in trouble. Her hands could barely hold the reins anymore, and Rosie was tiring. "Catherine Grace," she managed. "Thank you." James moved his horse closer, studying her with those keen eyes. "How long have you been riding?" 4 hours, maybe more. I lost track." He cursed under his breath, a word that the wind almost stole. "Your hands. Can you still feel them?" "Barely." Without another word, James dismounted, sinking into snow up to his knees. He moved to her side and reached up. "Give me the reins. I am going to lead your horse. You need to get your hands inside your coat before you lose fingers to frostbite." Catherine wanted to protest, but the pain in her extremities was becoming frightening. She handed over the reins and tucked her hands into her armpits, gasping at the painful tingling as blood tried to return to her fingers. James tied Rosie's reins to his saddle and remounted in one smooth motion, then started forward again, breaking trail with his larger horse. They rode in silence for a while, James leading them with a sureness that suggested he knew this country well. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and the world had become a white void where sky and earth merged into one. Catherine focused on staying in the saddle, on keeping her hands warm, on not thinking about Tommy's labored breathing as she had left him in the care of their neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. "Tell me about your brother," James called back, his voice carrying despite the wind. "Keep talking. Stay awake." Catherine understood what he was doing. The cold made you want to sleep, and sleep in a storm like this meant death. "Tommy," she said, forcing her voice to work, "he is 10 years old, too smart for his own good. He loves books and wants to be a scientist someday, studies everything, bugs, rocks, stars." "Sounds like a fine boy." "He is all I have left." The words came out raw, more emotion than she had intended to show a stranger. James half turned in his saddle, and something in his expression told her he understood loss. "Then we make sure he gets his chance to be that scientist. How far did the doctor say you needed to go?" "To the Grand Hotel in Visalia. There is a physician staying there, came out from San Francisco. He has the medicine Tommy needs, new treatment for pneumonia. I know the place. We are maybe 10 miles out still, but at this pace, in this storm, it will take us another 4 or 5 hours. Catherine's heart sank. She had hoped they were closer. "Will Tommy have that long?" "The medicine you already gave him, the morphine, that will help ease his breathing, buy him time. And Mrs. Rodriguez is a good woman. She raised 5 children of her own. He is in capable hands." James's voice was steady, reassuring. "But you need to stay strong. He needs you to finish this ride." They pushed on, and James kept her talking. He asked about her ranch, about how she learned to ride, about anything and everything. Catherine found herself telling this stranger things she had not spoken of in years, how her father had wanted a son but got her instead, and decided that a daughter who could ride and shoot was just as good. How her mother had despaired of ever teaching her to be a proper lady. How Tommy had been a surprise, born when Catherine was 12, and how she had helped raise him, had been more mother than sister in many ways. In turn, James talked about his own life. He ran a cattle ranch with his younger brother Joshua, who was 19. Their parents had moved to California during the gold rush, but his father had been smart enough to invest in land instead of chasing dreams of easy gold. They had built a good operation, and when both parents died of influenza 3 years ago, James and Joshua had kept it going. "Do you ever get lonely?" Catherine asked, surprised at her own boldness. Perhaps the cold and exhaustion were stripping away her usual reserve. James was quiet for a moment, the only sound the crunch of hooves in snow and the endless moan of the wind. "Yes," he finally said. "The ranch keeps us busy, but it is not the same as having family around. Joshua is talking about going east for schooling. He wants to study engineering. I encourage him, but I know when he goes, that ranch house will feel pretty empty." "You could marry?" Catherine said, then immediately felt heat rise to her frozen cheeks. "I apologize. That was forward of me." But James laughed, a warm sound that somehow made the storm seem less oppressive. "No offense taken. You're right, I could. Truth is, there are not many unmarried women around Porterville. And the ones that are, well, we have known each other since we were children. Hard to see someone romantic when you remember them with mud on their face and frogs in their pockets." Despite everything, Catherine smiled. "I never put frogs in my pockets. Lizards, maybe." "A woman after my own heart," James said, And there was something in his tone that made Catherine's stomach flip in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. The hours crawled by. James stopped once to check their surroundings, pulling out a compass and studying it before adjusting their course slightly. "Storm has pushed us a bit east," he explained, "but we are still on track." Catherine's exhaustion was becoming dangerous. Her eyes kept trying to close, and even with her hands tucked away, the cold was seeping into her bones. James seemed to sense her struggle because he started talking more, telling her stories about ranch life, about a particularly stubborn bull named Goliath who had once chased Joshua up a tree and kept him there for 3 hours. About the time they had found a mountain lion cub orphaned and tried to raise it, only to have it escape and terrorize the chickens for a week before wandering back into the wild. "You are a good storyteller," Catherine murmured, fighting to keep her eyes open. "And you are a tough woman to still be in that saddle," James replied. "Not much farther now, another hour, maybe less. The wind is shifting, which means we're getting closer to town." He was right. Gradually, the fury of the storm seemed to lessen just slightly. The snow still fell thick and fast, but the wind was not quite as vicious. And then, like a miracle, lights appeared in the distance, faint and wavering, but there, Visalia. "We made it," Catherine breathed, tears stinging her eyes. "Not yet," James cautioned. "Stay alert. We still have to find that hotel." But knowing they were close gave Catherine new strength. She straightened in her saddle, taking back Rosie's reins as the buildings of Visalia began to emerge from the white. The town was larger than Porterville, with a main street lined with 2-story buildings. Most were dark at this late hour, but here and there, lamps glowed in windows. James led them straight to the Grand Hotel, a substantial brick building that looked like a palace to Catherine's exhausted eyes. He dismounted and was at her side in an instant, reaching up to help her down. When Catherine tried to step down, her legs buckled, numb from hours in the saddle. James caught her, his strong arms supporting her weight. "Easy," he said softly. "I have you." For just a moment, Catherine let herself lean against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body through their heavy coats. Then she forced herself to stand. "The medicine. I need to see the doctor." "Then let us get you inside." James kept one arm around her waist as they climbed the steps to the hotel's porch. He pushed open the door and warmth rushed out to meet them. The lobby was small but well appointed, with a fire roaring in a stone fireplace and a night clerk dozing behind the desk. The man jerked awake at their entrance, his eyes widening at their snow-covered appearance. "We need to see the doctor from San Francisco," James said, his tone brooking no argument. "Right now." "It is past midnight," the clerk protested weakly. "A child's life is at stake," Catherine said, finding her voice. "Please." Something in her face must have convinced him, because the clerk nodded quickly and disappeared up the stairs. Catherine stood by the fire trying to thaw out, her entire body shaking now that she had stopped moving. James stayed close, watching her with concern. "You should sit," he said. "I will fall asleep if I sit." "Then I will make sure you wake up when the doctor comes." Before Catherine could respond, footsteps sounded on the stairs, and a portly man in his 50s descended, tying a robe over his nightshirt. His eyes were sharp despite the hour. "I am Dr. Harrison Mitchell. What is this emergency?" Catherine explained quickly, her words tumbling over each other in her haste. Tommy's age, his symptoms, how long he had been sick, what the Porterville doctor had said. Dr. Mitchell listened intently, nodding. "You are right to be concerned," he said when she finished. "Pneumonia in a child that young is very serious. The medicine I have, it is a new formulation, still experimental, but it has shown excellent results." He disappeared back upstairs and returned within minutes, carrying a small black bag. From it, he withdrew a glass bottle filled with white powder. "Mix 1 teaspoon of this with water 3 times a day," he instructed. "You must also keep the child warm and make him drink as much liquid as possible. Broth, water, weak tea. The fever must come down." "How much do I owe you?" Catherine asked, reaching for the small purse she had tucked inside her coat. Dr. Mitchell named a sum that made her heart sink. She had enough, but just barely, and only because she'd been saving for months to buy a new plow. She counted out the bills with shaking hands and took the precious bottle, tucking it carefully into her inner coat pocket. "Thank you," she whispered. "Get that medicine to your brother quickly," Dr. Mitchell said. "And, young lady, you need to rest. You look about to collapse." "I have to get back to Porterville tonight." "That is madness," the doctor protested. "The storm is still raging out there." "My brother cannot wait until morning." Catherine turned to James, feeling guilty for assuming he would help her again. "I understand if you need to rest. You have already done so much. I can make the journey back alone." James shook his head, his expression resolute. "I told you we were in this together. I'm not letting you ride back alone. But the doctor is right. We both need at least a few hours' rest, and so do the horses. We will not help your brother if we freeze to death on the way back." Catherine wanted to argue, but exhaustion was making her thoughts fuzzy. She knew he was right. "A few hours," she conceded. "No more." The clerk, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes, cleared his throat. "We have rooms available. I can have them prepared." James paid for 2 rooms before Catherine could protest, waving away her objections. "Save your money for your brother," he said simply. The rooms were on the 2nd floor, side by side. Catherine's was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a thick quilt and a washstand in the corner. She took off her wet coat and boots, her movements slow and clumsy. Every part of her ached, and now that she had stopped moving, the full weight of her exhaustion crashed down on her. She lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a moment, but sleep claimed her almost instantly. It felt like she had barely closed her eyes when knocking woke her. Pale gray light filtered through the window, and Catherine lurched upright, panic flooding through her. "Catherine?" James's voice came through the door. "It is time. The storm has eased enough to travel." She was on her feet in seconds, pulling on her still damp boots and coat. When she opened the door, James stood there looking as tired as she felt, but his eyes were clear and determined. "I checked on the horses," he said, "fed and rested them. We should make better time going back. The worst of the storm has passed." They descended to the lobby, where the clerk had prepared a basket with bread, cheese, and a thermos of hot coffee. James paid him with thanks, and then they were outside again. The world was transformed. Snow covered everything in a pristine white blanket, and though flakes still fell, they drifted gently now instead of pelting down. The sky was lightening, dawn not far off. The ride back was faster, as James had predicted. The storm's fury had exhausted itself, leaving behind a strange peace. The horses moved more easily, and with daylight coming, they could see the trail. James and Catherine rode side by side now, sharing the coffee and food from the basket. "Tell me more about Tommy," James said as they rode. "What does he look like?" Catherine smiled, the first genuine smile in days. "He has our mother's red hair and freckles. His eyes are green like mine. He is small for his age, which worries him, but I keep telling him he will have his growth spurt. He has this habit of pushing his spectacles up his nose when he's thinking hard about something." "He wears spectacles?" "Since he was 7. He was having trouble seeing the blackboard at school. Our father took him all the way to Fresno to get them fitted. Tommy cried because he thought they made him look strange, but then he could see clearly again, and he forgot to be self-conscious." "He sounds like a boy worth saving," James said quietly. "He is worth everything." They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Catherine found herself studying James when she thought he was not looking. In the growing daylight, she could see him more clearly. He had a strong, honest face, weathered from years of outdoor work. His hands on the reins were capable and scarred, working hands. There was something deeply reassuring about his presence, something that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father died. "What are you thinking?" James asked, catching her looking. Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks, but decided honesty was easier than deflection. "I am thinking that I am grateful you came along when you did. I truly do not believe I would have made it without you." You would have found a way, James said. You are not the type to give up. How can you know that? You have only just met me. Because you were already hours into an impossible ride when I found you and you were still going. Because you did not hesitate to ride into a blizzard for someone you love. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. His words warmed Catherine in a way the coffee could not. You did not have to help me, she said softly. You could have just told me I was foolish and ridden on. I could have, James agreed, but where is the honor in that? Besides, I have been looking for a woman who can ride through a blizzard without complaining. They are hard to find. Catherine laughed, surprised that she could feel such lightness after the fear and exhaustion of the past day. Is that what you look for in a woman? The ability to nearly freeze to death without complaint? Among other things, Woodix, James said, and the look he gave her made her heart skip. Courage, determination, love for family, those seem like good qualities to me. They were flirting, Catherine realized with a start. In the middle of a desperate ride to save her brother's life, with exhaustion still weighing on them both, they were flirting. It should have felt wrong, inappropriate, but somehow it did not. Somehow it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The sun was fully up now, turning the snow-covered landscape into a sparkling wonderland. The Sierra Nevada mountains rose in the distance, their peaks disappearing into clouds. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, and Catherine understood in that moment why her parents had loved this land enough to stay. There, James said, pointing ahead, that ridge. Once we are over that, we will be able to see Porterville. New energy surged through Catherine. They urged the horses faster, and Rosie seemed to understand the urgency, pushing through the snow with renewed vigor. When they crested the ridge, Catherine's eyes stung with tears of relief. There, nestled in the valley below, was Porterville. Smoke rose from chimneys, and she could make out individual buildings along the main street. We made it, she breathed. You made it, James corrected, and your brother is going to be fine. They descended into town as fast as they dared on the snowy trail. People were out shoveling walks and tending to animals, and more than one head turned to stare as Catherine and James rode past. Catherine knew there would be talk. A young unmarried woman riding into town with a man, both of them snow-covered and clearly having spent the night together somewhere, even innocently. But she could not bring herself to care. All that mattered was Tommy. She led James to her small house on the edge of town, barely more than a cabin, really, with a corral for the horses and a small barn. Catherine was off Rosie before the mare had fully stopped, running for the door. She burst inside, her eyes immediately going to the narrow bed in the corner where Tommy lay. Mrs. Rodriguez, a plump woman in her 60s with kind eyes, rose from the chair beside the bed. Catherine, thank God. He has been holding on, but the fever is very high. Catherine rushed to Tommy's side. Her little brother looked so small and fragile, his face flushed with fever, his red hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. His breathing was labored, each breath a fight. But his eyes flickered open at her touch, and he managed a weak smile. You came back, he whispered. Of course I did. Catherine pulled the bottle of medicine from her pocket with trembling hands. I brought you something that is going to make you better. She prepared the medicine exactly as Dr. Mitchell had instructed, mixing the powder with water and helping Tommy sit up enough to drink it. He grimaced at the taste, but swallowed it all. Catherine eased him back down, brushing his damp hair off his forehead. Rest now, she murmured. The medicine is going to help. Tommy's eyes had already closed again, his body exhausted from even that small effort. Mrs. Rodriguez squeezed Catherine's shoulder. You did it, child. Now we wait and pray. It was only then that Catherine remembered James. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, his hat in his hands, watching her with Tommy. When their eyes met, his expression was soft, tender even. I should go, James said quietly. Let you tend to your brother. Wait. Catherine stood, suddenly not wanting him to leave. He had become such a presence in the past day, a partner in this desperate venture. The thought of him just riding away felt wrong. Please, let me at least offer you a meal. It is the least I can do. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke up before James could answer. You must stay, young man. I will not hear of you leaving without a proper meal and rest. You look as exhausted as our Catherine. James hesitated, clearly not wanting to impose, but Catherine added her own plea. Please, James, I would like you to stay, to see that this story has a happy ending. Something shifted in James's expression at her use of his first name, at the clear desire in her voice for him to remain. All right, he said. I will stay for a while. Mrs. Rodriguez, bless her, immediately bustled into action. She had kept a pot of stew warm on the stove, and soon the small house filled with the rich smell of beef and vegetables. James saw to the horses, making sure they were brushed down and fed and sheltered in the barn. When he came back inside, stomping snow off his boots, Catherine had set the small table with mismatched dishes. They ate in companionable silence, both too tired and too hungry for much conversation. Mrs. Rodriguez sat with Tommy, wiping his forehead with a cool cloth. Catherine could barely taste the food, her attention divided between the plate in front of her and her brother in the bed. But James ate with the steady efficiency of a working man, and she found herself watching the way his hands moved, the way he held his spoon. This is excellent, Mrs. Rodriguez, James said when he had finished. Thank you. It is I who should thank you, the older woman replied. Catherine told me how you helped her. You may have saved both their lives. James shifted uncomfortably, clearly not used to praise. I did what anyone would do. No, Catherine said firmly. You did what a good man would do. There is a difference. Their eyes met across the small table, and something passed between them, something warm and promising. Mrs. Rodriguez, watching this exchange, smiled to herself and said nothing. The day passed slowly. James stayed, despite Catherine's protests that he must be needed at his own ranch. He helped her chop wood to keep the fire going, hauled water from the well, and insisted she rest while he kept watch over Tommy. Catherine found herself grateful beyond words for his presence. The fear that had driven her through the storm had not left, and every time she looked at Tommy's flushed face, her heart clenched. But by late afternoon, something changed. Tommy's fever broke. Catherine was sitting beside him holding his small hand when his eyes opened. They were clear and focused, not glazed with fever. I am thirsty, he said, his voice stronger than it had been. Catherine nearly sobbed with relief. She helped him drink some water, then some broth that Mrs. Rodriguez warmed. Tommy managed several spoonfuls before exhaustion claimed him again, but this time his sleep looked peaceful, his breathing easier. The medicine is working, Mrs. Rodriguez said, and Catherine heard the relief in the older woman's voice too. James, who had been standing by the window, turned with a genuine smile lighting his face. He's going to be all right. Yes, Catherine whispered. Thanks to you. Mrs. Rodriguez, reading the moment with the wisdom of her years, announced that she needed to return home to her own family. But I will check in tomorrow, she promised, giving Catherine a warm hug. You have a good man here, she added in a whisper that James definitely heard, if his reddening ears were any indication. After she left, Catherine and James were alone for the first time since entering the house. The small space suddenly felt very intimate. Catherine busied herself tidying up, uncertain what to say now that the crisis had passed. I should probably head home, James said, but he did not move toward the door. It is getting dark, Catherine pointed out, and you must be exhausted. There is space in the barn. It would not be proper for you to stay in the house, but I have blankets I could bring out. Are you sure? James asked. I do not want to impose more than I already have. You have imposed nothing. You have given everything. Catherine met his eyes. Please stay, at least for tonight. James nodded slowly. All right, for tonight. Catherine prepared a space in the barn, laying out thick quilts over the hay in the loft. It was not luxurious, but it was dry and out of the wind, and with the body heat from the horses below, it would be warm enough. When she showed James the setup, he smiled. "This is better than many places I have slept," he assured her. "Thank you." They stood there in the dim barn, lit only by the lantern Catherine had brought, and suddenly the weight of everything that had happened over the past day and night crashed over her. The fear, the exhaustion, the desperate hope, and now the overwhelming relief. Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. "Hey," James said softly, stepping closer. "He is going to be fine. You saved him." "We saved him," Catherine corrected. And then, before she could think better of it, she stepped into his arms. James held her carefully at first, as if she might break, but when Catherine pressed closer, his arms tightened around her. She buried her face in his chest and let herself cry. Great, shaking sobs of relief and exhaustion. He did not tell her to stop, did not try to shush her. He just held her, one hand stroking her back, murmuring soft words of comfort. When the storm of tears finally passed, Catherine pulled back, mortified. "I am so sorry. I do not know what came over me." "Do not apologize," James said, his hand still resting gently on her arms. "You have been through hell. You are entitled to a few tears." Catherine looked up at him. At this man who had appeared out of a blizzard like an answer to a prayer she had not even known to say. In the lantern light, his face was all angles and shadows, his gray-blue eyes dark and intense. She should step back, should put proper distance between them, but she could not make herself move. "James," she whispered, not even sure what she was asking. But he seemed to understand. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away the last of her tears. "Catherine, I'm embarks," he said, and her name had never sounded so beautiful. "I know this is fast. I know we have only just met. But I need you to know that these past hours with you have been the most alive I have felt in years." "I feel it too," Catherine admitted. "Like I have known you longer than a day. Like you were meant to find me in that storm." "Maybe I was," James said. And then he was lowering his head, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Catherine did not want to pull away. She rose on her toes and met him halfway. And when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of them learning the shape and taste of each other. But then James's arms tightened around her waist and Catherine's hands slid up to his shoulders, and the kiss deepened into something that made her forget the cold, the fear, everything but this moment and this man. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "I should not have done that," he said, though he did not sound particularly sorry. "I am glad you did," Catherine replied. "I wanted you to." "You are going to make me fall in love with you, Catherine Grace," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "Good," Catherine said boldly, "because I believe I am already halfway there with you, James Jackson." He kissed her again, and this time there was nothing tentative about it. It was a claiming, a promise, and Catherine responded with equal fervor. When they finally pulled apart, both were flushed and breathless. "I should let you rest," Catherine said reluctantly. "And you should check on Tommy," James agreed, but neither of them moved. Finally, with visible effort, James stepped back. "Tomorrow. Can I come back tomorrow? I need to check on my ranch, make sure Joshua did not burn the place down in my absence, but I could return by afternoon." "I would like that very much," Catherine said, her heart singing. She left him in the barn and returned to the house, checking on Tommy one more time before collapsing into her own narrow bed in the small room separated from the main space by a curtain. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, the memory of James's kiss warm on her lips. The next morning, Tommy was markedly improved. His fever was gone, and though he was weak, he was able to sit up and eat a full breakfast. Catherine administered the medicine again and watched with joy as color returned to his freckled face. "Who was that man?" Tommy asked after he had eaten. Mrs. Rodriguez said you rode through the storm with him. Catherine explained about meeting James in the blizzard, about how he had helped her reach Visalia and return home. Tommy listened with wide eyes, his mind clearly spinning the story into something grand. He sounds like a hero in a book, Tommy said, and like a knight. He is a rancher, Catherine corrected, but she was smiling, though I suppose he was rather heroic. Are you going to marry him? Tommy asked with the blunt honesty of a child. Tommy, I have known him one day. But you like him, I can tell. Catherine could not deny it. Yes, I like him very much. But these things take time. Tommy considered this, pushing his spectacles up his nose in that familiar gesture. I hope he comes back. I want to thank him. He will, Catherine said with certainty. He promised. James returned that afternoon, as he had said he would. Catherine heard the sound of hoofbeats and went to the door, her heart racing. He sat astride his roan, and behind him on a second horse was a young man who could only be his brother Joshua. Both carried bundles tied to their saddles. I brought reinforcements, James called as he dismounted, and supplies. Joshua, a lanky young man with the same gray-blue eyes as his brother but softer features, grinned as he slid off his horse. James told me about your ride through the storm. I had to meet the woman who impressed my brother so much. Joshua, James said warningly, but he was smiling. They brought the supplies inside, and Catherine was overwhelmed to see food, firewood, and even some books for Tommy. You did not need to do this, she protested. We wanted to, James said simply. Besides, Joshua here has been curious about scientific things lately. I thought he and Tommy might get along. Indeed, within minutes, Joshua was sitting by Tommy's bed, showing him a book about astronomy and discussing the planets. Catherine and James stood back watching them. That was kind of you, Catherine said softly, to think of Tommy. I was thinking of you, James admitted, hoping you might be more inclined to take a walk with me if your brother was entertained. Catherine's pulse quickened. A walk sounds lovely. They bundled up and stepped out into the crisp afternoon air. The snow sparkled under the sun, and the sky was a brilliant blue. James offered his arm, and Catherine took it, feeling the solid warmth of him even through layers of wool. They walked in silence at first, just enjoying the peace and each other's presence. Finally, James spoke. I meant what I said last night about falling in love with you. That was the exhaustion talking, Catherine said, though she did not believe it. No, James said firmly. It was the truth talking. Catherine, I know this is sudden. I know people will think we are crazy, but I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. This past day, riding through that storm with you, seeing your courage and your love for your brother, it showed me exactly the kind of woman I want in my life. Catherine stopped walking, turning to face him. I feel the same way. It frightens me how much I feel after such a short time. Then let us not be frightened together, James said, taking both her hands in his. Let us see where this goes. Properly. I want to court you, Catherine. I want to come calling, to take you to dances and church socials, to spend time getting to know everything about you. What if people talk, Catherine asked, about us riding together, about you staying in my barn? Let them talk, James said. Anyone who knows you will know you are a woman of honor, and anyone who thinks otherwise is not worth our time. Catherine laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. Then yes, James Jackson, I would be honored to let you court me. He kissed her right there in the snowy lane, and Catherine did not care who might see. When they returned to the house, faces flushed and eyes bright, Joshua took one look at them and smiled. About time, he muttered, which earned him a playful shove from his brother. The weeks that followed were the happiest Catherine could remember in a long time. Tommy continued to improve, gaining strength each day until he was back to his old self, pestering her with questions and reading every book he could get his hands on. Joshua became a regular visitor, clearly enjoying having someone near his own intellectual level to talk to, even if that someone was only 10 years old. and James came calling every day without fail. He helped Catherine with the heavy work around her small property, chopping wood and fixing the leaky roof she had been ignoring. But he also took her on long walks, taught her to dance in her small kitchen, and spent hours just talking with her, learning everything about her life and sharing his own. Catherine visited his ranch too, properly chaperoned by Joshua. It was a fine property with a sturdy house and well-maintained barns. The cattle were healthy and the operation was clearly prosperous. But what impressed Catherine most was the way James treated his hands with respect and fairness, and the way Joshua clearly adored his older brother. "He has been different since he met you," Joshua confided one afternoon while James was outside checking on a fence. "Happier, more alive. I'm grateful to you for that." "He has made me happy too," Catherine admitted. As winter gave way to early spring, James proposed. He did it properly, down on one knee in her small parlor with Tommy watching and beaming. Catherine said yes before he even finished asking, and when he slid his mother's ring onto her finger, she felt like the luckiest woman in California. They were married in April, in the small church in Porterville with half the town in attendance. Tommy stood up with Catherine, looking proud and important in his new suit, his spectacles polished to perfection. Joshua stood with James, and the two brothers kept exchanging grins throughout the ceremony. Catherine wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Rodriguez had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair. She had never felt more beautiful than when she saw the way James looked at her as she walked down the aisle. His eyes shone with love and pride, and when he took her hands in his, she felt the rightness of this moment in every fiber of her being. "You are everything I never knew I needed," James whispered as they stood before the preacher. "And you are the answer to my prayers," Catherine whispered back. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, James kissed her with a tenderness that made Catherine's eyes sting with happy tears. The congregation erupted in applause, and as they walked back down the aisle together, Catherine caught sight of Tommy. He was grinning so wide his face looked like it might split, and she knew that her brother approved of her choice. They held the reception at James's ranch, which was now Catherine's home too. The house had felt overwhelmingly large when she first moved in, so different from her tiny cabin, but James assured her they would fill it up with life and love soon enough. "Are you happy?" James asked her as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, watched by all their friends and neighbors. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Catherine replied honestly. "Sometimes I still cannot believe that you appeared out of that blizzard." "It was fate," James said. "It had to be. Nothing else explains how I happened to be on that exact trail at that exact time." "Then I am grateful to fate," Catherine said, "and to blizzards and to everything that brought you to me." "And I am grateful to your courage," James replied. "If you had not been brave enough to ride into that storm, we never would have met." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Catherine had worried that merging two independent lives would be difficult, but with James it felt natural. He respected her opinions and treated her as a true partner in running the ranch. Catherine threw herself into her new role, learning the business side of ranching, keeping the books, and helping make decisions about stock and land. Tommy thrived in his new home, with more space to roam and explore than he had ever had before. Joshua took him under his wing, teaching him to ride better and to handle cattle. But Tommy's heart remained in his books and studies, and James made sure he had access to the best education available, even paying for a tutor to come twice a week from Fresno. "You do not have to do that," Catherine protested when James first suggested it. "It is expensive." "He is my brother now too," James said firmly, "and he is brilliant. He deserves every opportunity to develop that mind of his. Besides, he is family. We take care of family." That was James, Catherine thought with a rush of love, always thinking of others, always generous with those he loved. The first year of their marriage flew by in a blur of happiness. There were challenges, of course. A harsh summer that tested their water supply, a bout of illness among the cattle that required long nights and hard work to contain. But they faced everything together, and Catherine found that sharing burdens made them lighter. When Catherine discovered she was pregnant in their second year of marriage, she was nervous to tell James. They had not discussed children much. Both focused on building their life together and caring for Tommy and Joshua. But when she finally worked up the courage to share the news over dinner one night, James's face lit up with such pure joy that all her worries melted away. "Truly," he asked, coming around the table to kneel beside her chair, "we are going to have a baby?" "Truly," Catherine confirmed, laughing as he gathered her into his arms. "I am going to be an uncle," Tommy exclaimed, looking delighted. "And I am going to be an uncle too," Joshua added with a grin. "This calls for a celebration." The pregnancy was not easy. Catherine was sick for the first few months, and the work of the ranch became more difficult as her belly grew. But James was endlessly patient and supportive, taking on extra work himself and hiring an additional hand to help ease the burden. He fussed over her constantly, making sure she rested and ate properly. "I am not an invalid," Catherine protested one afternoon when he insisted she sit down instead of helping with the laundry. "No, you are carrying my child," James replied. "Our child. Let me take care of you." Their son was born in the spring, during a week when the wildflowers covered the hills in a riot of color. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Catherine was certain she could not go on. But James stayed with her through it all, holding her hand and whispering encouragement, even though the midwife clucked her tongue about men being present for such things. When the baby finally arrived, red-faced and screaming his displeasure at being born, Catherine wept with relief and joy. James cut the cord with shaking hands, and when the midwife placed the cleaned and swaddled infant in his arms, Catherine saw tears streaming down her husband's face. "He is perfect," James breathed. "Catherine, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Michael James Jackson, called him Mikey from the start. He had James's gray-blue eyes and Catherine's red hair, and from the moment he drew breath, he owned both their hearts completely. Watching James with their son, Catherine fell in love with him all over again. He was a devoted father, rising in the night to help with feedings, carrying Mikey around the ranch strapped to his chest in a sling that one of the ranch hands had shown him how to make. Tommy was equally smitten with his nephew, reading to him from his science books even though the baby was far too young to understand. "He needs to hear the words," Tommy insisted. "Studies show that babies who are read to develop language faster." Joshua, who had finally left for engineering school back east the previous fall, returned for the summer and declared Mikey the finest baby he had ever seen. "Though I am biased," he admitted, "he is family." Life fell into a new rhythm, one shaped around Mikey's needs and the demands of the ranch. Catherine was tired in a way she had never been before, the bone-deep exhaustion of new motherhood. But she was also happy in a way that filled her up and made everything else worthwhile. 2 years later, Catherine gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Emily Grace Jackson. Emily was easier than Mikey had been, a calm baby who rarely cried and seemed content to observe the world with solemn green eyes. Mikey was fascinated by his little sister, constantly wanting to help care for her. "Gentle," Catherine reminded him constantly as he patted Emily's downy head. "She is very small." "I know, Mama," Mikey said seriously. "I am being careful." Tommy was 14 now, on the cusp of manhood, and had announced his intention to attend college. James was determined to make it happen, setting aside money from the ranch profits. "You are going to do great things, James Warner," James told him. "I know it." Joshua had graduated with his engineering degree and taken a position with a railroad company in Sacramento. He visited when he could, and each time Catherine saw how proud James was of his younger brother, how their relationship had only grown stronger despite the distance. The ranch prospered over the years. James's hard work and smart decisions paid off, and they were able to expand their holdings, buying adjacent land when it became available. Catherine proved to have a head for business, managing their finances with a skill that impressed even the banker in Porterville. Together they built something solid and lasting, a legacy for their children. When Mikey was 5 and Emily was 3, Catherine became pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, confident in her body's ability to do this work. Their third child, a son they named Thomas Joshua Jackson, in honor of both their brothers, arrived on a warm summer evening just as the sun was setting. Tommy, now 18 and preparing to leave for college in the fall, wept when he learned the baby carried his name. "You gave me a second chance at life," he told Catherine, holding his tiny namesake with the awkward care of a young man unaccustomed to infants. "You rode through a blizzard for me. I will never forget that." "And James rode with me," Catherine reminded him. "We both saved you, just as you have enriched our lives beyond measure." "I am going to miss you all when I'm at school," Tommy said softly. "And we will miss you," Catherine replied, "but we are also so proud of you. You are going to change the world, Tommy. I have always known it." Life continued its steady march forward. Tommy excelled at university, studying chemistry and biology with a focus on medicine. He wrote long letters home detailing his studies and his dreams of finding cures for diseases like the pneumonia that had nearly killed him. James and Catherine read these letters aloud at the dinner table, their pride evident. Joshua married a woman named Sarah, an artist he met in Sacramento, and they made James and Catherine aunt and uncle to a succession of nieces and nephews who came to visit the ranch every summer. The house filled with laughter and chaos exactly as James had predicted on their wedding day. Mikey grew into a sturdy boy who loved the ranch and everything about it. By the time he was 10, he could ride as well as any of the hands and was already showing an aptitude for working with cattle. "I want to run this ranch someday," he announced one evening at dinner, "just like Papa." James reached across the table and squeezed Catherine's hand, his eyes bright with emotion. "Then we will teach you everything you need to know," he promised. Emily was different from her brother, quieter and more thoughtful. She loved books almost as much as Tommy had, but her interests ran towards stories and poetry rather than science. She would spend hours sitting under the big oak tree near the house, reading or writing in the journals Catherine gave her. "I think she is going to be a writer," Catherine told James one evening as they watched Emily from the porch, her nose buried in a book. "She has your gift for determination," James replied. "Whatever she decides to do, she will do it well." Little Thomas, called TJ to avoid confusion with Uncle Tommy, was a bundle of energy and mischief. He kept Catherine on her toes, always getting into something or asking a million questions. But he had a sweet nature that made it impossible to stay angry at him for long, and his infectious laughter could light up the darkest day. As the children grew, Catherine and James's love deepened and matured. The passionate excitement of new love had not faded, but it had been joined by something richer, a bone-deep partnership built on trust, respect, and shared history. They still stole kisses when the children were not looking, still held hands when they walked together in the evenings. But now those gestures carried the weight of years, of challenges overcome together, of a life built side by side. One evening when the children were in bed and the house was finally quiet, Catherine and James sat on the porch swing, watching the stars come out over the mountains. It had been nearly 15 years since that desperate ride through the blizzard, but Catherine could still remember every detail with perfect clarity. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked James softly. "When we met?" "All the time," James admitted. "How close we came to missing each other. If I had left Woodlake an hour earlier or later, if I had taken a different route, if you had turned back instead of pushing forward." "Fate," Catherine said, as she had said so many times over the years. "Fate and your courage," James replied. "You saved Tommy's life that night, but in a way, you saved mine too. I was lonely before I met you, even if I did not want to admit it, going through the motions of life but not really living. You changed everything." "We changed each other," Catherine said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I was so focused on just surviving after Mama and Papa died. You showed me that life could be more than just getting through each day." James kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Catherine, more now than even on the day we married, and I loved you plenty then." I love you too, Catherine replied, with everything I am. They sat in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other and the peace of the evening. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and the horses in the corral nickered softly to each other. It was a perfect moment, the kind that Catherine tried to hold on to remember when times were hard. The years continued to pass with their mixture of joy and sorrow. Catherine's friend Mrs. Rodriguez passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, and Catherine mourned the woman who had been like a second mother to her. Tommy graduated from university with honors and took a position at a hospital in San Francisco where he began his work in medical research. Joshua's railroad career flourished, and his family grew to include 4 children who adored their ranch visits. Mikey, true to his childhood declaration, took over more and more of the ranch operations as he grew older. By the time he was 20, he was running most of the daily operations, with James focusing on the business side and long-term planning. Emily attended a women's college back east, shocking the town with her ambition but making her parents intensely proud. She wrote beautiful letters home, describing her classes and her dreams of becoming a published author. TJ was the wild card, unable to settle on any one interest. He tried ranching, tried working in town at the mercantile, even spent a summer working on Joshua's railroad project. But he never seemed to find his passion, and Catherine worried about him in the way mothers worry about the child who cannot find his way. "He will figure it out," James assured her. "Some people just take longer to know what they want. Look at me. I thought I wanted to be a rancher my whole life, and I did, but I never knew I was missing something until I met you. Then everything clicked into place." "I hope you are right," Catherine said. "I just want him to be happy." "He will be," James promised. "He is our son. He has good parents and a loving family. That is a solid foundation. The rest will come." When Catherine was 43, Tommy sent word that he was getting married. His bride-to-be was a nurse at the hospital where he worked, a woman named Elizabeth who shared his passion for medicine and helping others. The whole family made the trip to San Francisco for the wedding, and Catherine cried happy tears as she watched her little brother, now a distinguished doctor with his own research laboratory, pledge his life to his beloved. "You did good, sis," Tommy told her at the reception, pulling her aside for a private moment. "None of this would have been possible without you, without that ride through the blizzard." "Without James," Catherine corrected. "We did it together." "Yes," Tommy agreed, looking across the room to where James was talking with Joshua and laughing at something his brother had said. "You found a good one. I'm glad you did not freeze to death before you could marry him." "Tommy?" Catherine laughed despite herself. "What a thing to say at your wedding." "But true," Tommy insisted, grinning. "Now come on, Elizabeth wants to meet the famous aunt who saved my life." Life on the ranch continued its steady rhythm. Grandchildren began to arrive as first Mikey married a girl from a neighboring ranch, a capable young woman named Margaret who could rope a steer as well as any man, and then Emily returned from the east with a husband in tow, a newspaperman named Richard who wanted to start a paper in Porterville. TJ, much to everyone's surprise, discovered a talent for horse breeding and began developing a reputation for producing excellent working animals. Catherine and James grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies moving slower than they once had. But their love remained constant, a steady flame that had burned for decades. They still took their evening walks when the weather permitted, still held hands across the dinner table, still found moments to steal away and be alone together. One winter evening when they were both in their late 50s, a blizzard swept down from the mountains. It was not as severe as the one that had brought them together, but it was still substantial, blanketing the ranch in snow and howling around the house. Catherine stood at the window watching the white swirl outside and felt James come up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Remember?" he asked softly. "How could I forget?" Catherine leaned back against him. "That was the night my life really began." "Mine too," James said. "You know, sometimes I lie awake at night and think about all the things that had to happen exactly right for us to meet. If your parents had not come to California, if mine had not, if Tommy had not gotten sick, if I had not been visiting my aunt that specific week. 1,000 small decisions and accidents of fate, all leading to that moment when I saw you riding through the storm. Do you think we would have met eventually, even without the blizzard? Catherine asked. Do you think we were meant to find each other? I do not know, James admitted, but I'm grateful we did not have to test that theory. I am grateful for every day we have had together, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones, because we faced them together. Catherine turned in his arms to face him. His face was lined now, weathered by years of sun and wind, but to her he was as handsome as the day she met him. Maybe more so because now she knew every expression, every quirk, every facet of the man she loved. I would ride through 1,000 blizzards to find you, she said, every single time. James kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Catherine felt the same flutter in her stomach that she had felt at 19 when he first kissed her in the barn. Some things never changed. They lived to see their grandchildren grow, to hold great-grandchildren in their arms. The ranch passed to Mikey and his wife, who ran it with the same dedication and love that James and Catherine had shown. Emily published her first novel to critical acclaim, a sweeping romance set in the Old West that Catherine suspected was inspired by her parents' story. TJ's horse breeding operation became renowned throughout California, and he finally settled down with a school teacher who gentled his wild spirit without breaking it. Tommy made groundbreaking discoveries in the treatment of respiratory diseases, work that saved countless lives. He never forgot that he owed his life to his sister's courage and a stranger's kindness in a blizzard, and he made sure his own children knew the story. As Catherine and James entered their 70s, they began to slow down in earnest. The ranch was in good hands, and they spent more time in the house, reading and talking and watching their family grow. Catherine's hands became twisted with arthritis, making it hard to do the delicate work she had once enjoyed, but James would massage them every evening, working the aching joints with infinite patience. "You do not have to do that," Catherine protested, though she never actually stopped him. "I want to," James replied. "You took care of everyone your whole life. Let me take care of you now." They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a party that filled the ranch house and spilled out onto the grounds. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, friends and neighbors, ranch hands past and present, all came to celebrate the love story that had started in a blizzard half a century before. "Tell the story, Grandma," one of the great-grandchildren begged. "Tell us how you and Grandpa met." So Catherine told it again, as she had told it dozens of times over the years, about the desperate ride through the storm, about the cowboy who appeared out of the white like a miracle, about medicine and fear and courage and love. James held her hand as she spoke, adding his own details, and by the end there was not a dry eye in the house. "You were heroes," the child declared. "No," Catherine said gently. "We were just two people who found each other when we needed it most. The real heroism was in choosing to love each other every day after that, through good times and bad." 50 years of choosing each other, James added, "and I would choose you again every time, Catherine. Every single time." They grew older still, their pace slowing to a shuffle, their world shrinking to the house and the porch where they still sat every evening, weather permitting. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, distilled to its pure essence by time and shared experience. Catherine passed first, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 76, with James holding her hand just as he had held it through so many trials and triumphs over the decades. Her last words were of love for him and for their family, and though her leaving tore a hole in James's heart, he took comfort in knowing that she had lived a full and happy life. James followed her 2 years later, at the age of 80. His children and grandchildren were with him at the end, but his last words were not for them. "Catherine," he whispered, his eyes focused on something they could not see. "I am coming, my love. Wait for me." And then he was gone, joining his beloved in whatever came after. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under the same sky where they had first fallen in love. On the shared headstone, their children had inscribed a simple message: James Jackson and Catherine Grace Jackson, together in life, together in death, a love born in a blizzard, lasting through eternity. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren, a testament to what two people could build when they chose to face life together. And on winter nights when the snow fell thick and the wind howled down from the mountains, the family would gather by the fire and tell the story of Catherine and James, of a desperate ride through a blizzard, of a cowboy who rode halfway to meet a woman who needed help, and of the love that grew from that fateful meeting. It became a legend in the family, a reminder that sometimes the hardest moments in life lead to the greatest blessings, that courage and kindness can change everything. That love, real love, is worth fighting for, worth riding through storms for, worth choosing every single day. And in Porterville, California, in the shadow of the Sierra Nevada mountains where two people once rode through a blizzard together, their story lived on, inspiring new generations to be brave, to be kind, and to believe in the power of love to transform ordinary lives into something extraordinary. The end.